Yeah, a lot of it did feel like that Tom Hanks Apollo movie about like trying to get to the moon when you don't have computers. And obviously like that's gross hyperbole and none of us were going to die of oxygen failure, but everything was handmade or 3D printed and made up. It was like every episode we had to come up with a new way to shoot it. And even just simple things of, you know, miking sound, monitoring the camera, moving the camera.
That's a good way of saying it. Pretty much every shot we came up with, we were doing it for the first time.
Hello and welcome to Reddit's first 360 AMA. I'm Stephen Greenwood, a creative director at Reddit, and this is the cast and crew of Gone, which is a new virtual reality web series that is airing as we speak. So the first question that we have is from user Real Life Moderator. Thank you for your question. They say, hey team, I just want to say I thought this was a very cool concept and the execution was really well done for something so new. Question, what was the most unexpected obstacle that you encountered after you had already started filming?
Real Life Moderator, the biggest obstacle for me was probably the actors. Like they were just consistently so amateurish and just artificiality. I'd say, honestly, the most like concrete problem for me was overheating on the cameras. We're filming this on a little Samsung pod that does everything for us. We were filming on a cluster of GoPros and sometimes we'd be filming on an A7S that we'd rotate a little bit every time. But everything that we were doing was so duct taped together that we would spend time just like fanning the cameras and rubbing ice pops on them and doing anything we could just to get through a take.
How do you see the future of VR shaping up, and why should I prefer this format over traditional film?
All right. So to answer the end of your question, you don't have to prefer anything over anything. It's actually not filmmaking, and it's different enough from it that it should be considered another medium. I don't even think it's something between filmmaking and games. It's its own different thing, and eventually we're going to develop our own ways of telling stories with it that are going to be fundamentally different from everything else. Like a book is different from a movie, and it's different from like a radio program.
All right, Popalicious says, cool concept. What are the biggest drawbacks to filming this way? And do you film an entire scene in one take?
You know, if you're used to doing film or television, you're used to being able to edit yourself as you go. So if you make a mistake, you can kind of say, okay, I'm gonna take it back. But if you make a mistake, you're done. And the scene, you have to start over. So that was definitely a drawback, but it was also, a challenge that was kind of fun to take on.
Carissa, was that hard, the one take aspect of it?
Not really, but like one scene, like the one where I had to climb inside that tunnel on the soundstage, that was kind of harder than the rest, but we did it, so.
Nothing was hard for Carissa.
I know,
It's like watching Beyonce perform.
Yeah.
It's just like everything is, yeah. It's like, I always knew Carissa would show up.
Yeah.
MWax321 asks, how do you build a set for a 360-degree shot?
I pretty strongly feel that you build as few sets as possible. I find that artificial things that you could get away with on a film set, you can't get away with in VR. Even though the resolution is so much worse, there's artificiality is a lot more apparent. That being said, there was some stuff towards the end that we couldn't do without building sets because it was underground. So when we had to, you build it as realistically as possible.
In every possible direction, 360 degrees of it, like a real thing.
Yeah, it's different than if you build a set for anything else, where you want to leave the top off of the set to give yourself room to put the camera. You can't think about it that way. So if you're going to build a set, it has to be fully enclosed. So it's good for claustrophobic settings that we maybe fabricated, like the scientist's hovel. But it's better to just shoot in practical locations, I think, for all of the little nooks and crannies and details that people will catch.
Angel Cakes, thank you for your question. What is an element in VR sensory immersion that you feel hasn't been explored that you've introduced with this project and look forward to experimenting with more?
Universal timelines.
Yeah, Angel Cakes 3, one of the things that we had to like fight for, actually like pushing the technology that, of Milk a little bit further ahead was having this idea of moving around inside of a filmed 360 environment with a universal timeline. So that there's some navigation inside of this filmed world where time continues to move forward, which is sort of integral to what this experience is. But obviously is like, if you think about it, it gets very complicated for filming because you can't have multiple cameras because you would see those other cameras in the sphere. So these guys actually had to repeat the action synced with played back sound from the takes that we liked to earlier versions. So they were kind of karaokeing their own performance.
Rachel, you might be able to take a stab at this. They ask, any tips for writers interested in writing for 360?
Ooh, I think it's important, John M. Flores, from the very beginning that you realize that you are putting someone in a fully immersed environment. And I think just like we've talked about, remembering that the audience or the viewer can look around and decide what it is they want to focus on. You may want to think a little bit more about building these scenes that have a lot of, I know this is a directing thing, but a lot more action and choreography, if that's a direction you want to take, or just think atmospheric, creating experiences for the viewer.
This question comes from Stereophony, and they ask, so where do you hide the director, or the entire crew for that matter, and is the camera remotely operated?
Yeah, so Stereophony, I lost a lot of weight for the shoot and did some yoga so I could contort. Because it was, I mean, Luis would make a lot of fun of me because I would be...
I have footage.
Yeah, no, it's actually horrible editing it because like I have to look at myself hiding in places before it would paint me out in some instances. There's episode 3 like has a very like emotional scene between Lindsay and Alex, who plays her husband in it. And you know, like I'm crouching in the corner like Bob in Twin Peaks. You know, like I'm taking up as like little real estate as I can.
Thank you everybody so much for your questions. I hope you've enjoyed this experience. Again, the show is gone. There's a link to the episodes in the description below. Please check it out. And thank you all for participating today in this AMA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.